Thank you all for being with us this evening. Just a quick explanation as to what the first meeting tonight will be about. This is a special budget workshop. We'll begin at 5:30 and we will end the meeting shortly before our regularly scheduled meeting at 6:30. So we'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's budget workshop, budget hearing. And so with that said, I'll call the meeting to order. I'll declare that a quorum is present and that the media has been notified. Moving on to agenda item number 2, do I have a motion and a second tonight for approval of the agenda?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the agenda.
A second.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Thank you, Ms. Lee. Thank you, Ms. Schwabe. Ms. Lee has made a motion to approve the agenda. Did I get that in the correct order, Ms. Lee? You made the motion? Okay. And Ms. Schwabe has seconded the motion. All those in favor of approving tonight's agenda, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Tonight's agenda has been approved. Now we'll move to agenda item number 3, entitled Public Hearing of the 2014-2015 General Fund Budget. Up first is the budget presentation by Mr. Thomas, and that will be followed by public comment. And tonight's public comment is regarding the budget. There will also be public comments during the regular meeting. Mr. Thomas, the podium is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Dr. Thompson. It seems like yesterday we were doing 13-14. Year's gone by pretty fast. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing, so I don't know. A lot of the slides are going to be very familiar to you. There'll be a few changes in that there's some Senate projections that have been posted, but there's really no final projections posted. So I don't know if there's still some work in progress related to whatever's going on up there. But as far as the general comment, I think as far as the state perspective, this is one of the most miscommunicated or uncommunicated budget presentation as far as the state perspective of what's happening to the school districts and funding and being late and all that sort of thing. So it's been a challenge to try to come up with what it looks like. Again, just some final dates that have been legislatively acted on and participated in, so I just wanted to share that. Again, we took this budget on the road at these schools and those dates, so I want to remind you of those as well. Wanted to focus on this one a little bit. This has been a change from the last one in that the first yellow line where it says employer contributions, you notice the changed from a 0 increase to a -0. So minus $312,000. Also, too, a little bit of smoke and mirrors in that last item before last. It says, no, I'm sorry, the third item before last, aid to district special ed MOE, that $109,000, where it says allocated for 13-14. That's really been $1.1 million when it started out 13-14, but they changed to 109. So the 109 negative is really $1.1 million. So if you took that all the way down, almost pretty much a 0 wash for state revenues for the school district. And looking at other school districts, there are some that are in worse shape than ours. I think Greenville, no, there was one school district that was like $3 or $4 million underwater. That might have been Charleston, I think. So, so if there is a positive note, at least it's 0. So it could be negative. Just some reminders here about where the base student cost should be versus where it is. House Ways and Means has kind of stayed pretty consistent through the Senate and all. If we were looking at 2742, the budget would be very easy, and that would create almost about $19 million just for us alone. So that would be a godsend if we could get there in the next couple of years. Potential revenue impact, we've kind of seen some of these slides before. Of course, we went through reassessment. There was minimal growth. Been no increase in base student costs, but I wanted to bring your eyes to the revenue losses of employer contribution, at risk, gifted and talented, aid to school districts and aid to districts and MOE and the others. So there's been some pretty major negatives that have been offset by the increase in the weightings that are being projected through the EFA, but still are pretty much of a wash. So it becomes very difficult to balance the budget when a step is worth about 2% and about $4.2 million to the general fund. So really the only revenue growth will be the growth in student enrollment. So if that 659 is more, then that'll be more revenue, but also be more expensive. So we'll just have to follow that as we go.
Mr. Thomas, can
Yes.
you, going back to that last slide, can you explain the second line to us? Just give us a
Act 388,
budget.
yes, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Dr. Murray. Yeah, Act 388, since its enactment in 06 and 07 being the base year, they come up with a CPI, Consumer Price Index, for the whole state of South Carolina. And then they come up with population growth for every single county. Not school enrollment, but population in general. So there's really no connection to that population to what we see growth in the schools. So I think if they were to revisit, that might be one thing they would revisit as far as amending Act 388, but I wish they would just get rid of it. But so I know they're not going to do that. So when you add those two together, that means 3.66%. We could go up on our mills as a school board. So there's somewhat, we used to have fiscal autonomy. We have limited autonomy with this connection to Act 388. So so that 5.2 mils from 142.9 is whatever that comes up to be.
So that would be the ceiling.
That could be the ceiling, but you remember too, we went through reassessment, so we do have to have some formula to look at that, and what we're going to propose is within that Act 388 window, as far as, and we'll share that at the last slide.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Did that answer?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
And also too, on that particular line item, from the get-go, that fund has been underfunded. At the beginning was like 11 million, but I think the most recent statewide, it's 175 or 200 million dollars underfunded. So the money's got to come from somewhere. So logically, it's going to come from the biggest line item in the state budget, which is education. So it's coming from us to fund it. This is just a recap of assessment numbers, and then a recap of assessment by category. Again, some expenditure unknowns. We do have an increase in health insurance, but it wasn't as much as we anticipated or put in the budget. No cost of living due to legislation action, or there's been not what you call sequestration, but some loss of funds from federal projects, and that's caused some issues with IDEA and Title I and those sorts of things. So it's just called cuts instead of sequestration. Yes. Another slide to kind of piggyback on Act 388. This is what we're losing at this point in time annually with implementing Act 388 based on the current operating mills. You can see that bottom number is if Act 388 wasn't in place, we would generate $4.5 million by not doing anything. And that would have been a big shot in the arm, not only for us, but every other school district in the state being able to fund school operations for the general fund. The more building of 4% property, the worse that number gets. So I'm going to keep an eye on that pretty much every year to kind of see where it goes. Enrollment growth that you can, we've kind of shared before. Back into the priorities, we haven't changed much of these other than some trying to get the budget balance. We've taken some things out, reduced some, those sorts of things. So you'll see those cuts, or we'll talk about them. The most significant one here is the increased support staff from 1% to 4%. We had 4, and now it's down to 2. Or I think one presentation was 3, so we reduced that. We also reduced the next to the last bullet from 16 to FTEs to 15, and the fifth day planning, right? That was one of the other ones. So wanted to share those kind of reductions as we move forward, trying to balance it. Salary step and technology salary study. That salary study was a little bit higher from the first iteration, but we worked with Diane to figure out how to implement that, and we came up with a much lower number, so we were glad to do that. Revenue options, we've kind of talked about these before. Some of these are already implemented, and we're just going to kind of keep on doing. And some of these numbers are going to be in the revenue projections. They're not material, but they're in there. This is the first iteration of the budget priorities with everything that we wanted. This is with the changes that I just talked about. So I wanted to share those as well. And this might be kind of hard to read, but the budget summary, we talked about maybe doing two options. The first option is keeping the mills at 142.9, which again is within the realm of Act 388 and reassessment and that sort of thing, which is where we're at now. And then option two would be the mills. The formula called for a maximum of 144.2, but we could actually do 144.9, I believe, but we just kind of did this one. And you can see mills at 142.9, an estimated $223 million. At 144.2, an estimated $224.5 million. And that's the options that we wanted to share today. With some discussion, talking about the class size reduction and what that does negatively to, or the shifting of those EIA funds to the base student cost or weightings sites of things. Changes to the revenue have been some, just looking at history of revenues, kind of increased just miscellaneous revenue, facility use, and all those other things that we have that are actually built into offset utilities and custodian expenses and that sort of thing. So I include some revenue there. Included some revenue for the 142.9 based on the reassessment and the new millage, the new assessment rates, without raising taxes or millage rate there, and then just some minor things related to the fees and that sort of thing. Everything else pretty much stayed the same. Reductions in the expenditures have been what we just talked about, and then also in the employer fringe, always kind of try to overestimate what that was or will be. And with the health insurance increase of only 3.9, we were estimating close to 12. So I was able to cut some expenditures in the general fund for that to offset some of the to try to balance the budget. Again, these are estimates, and hopefully the state won't do anything to us for the next 4 or 5 days, and we can roll with this. So I wanted to share that with you. That's basically the presentation. So if you have any questions or ask for comments, I'm all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. We appreciate your presentation. Do we have any questions or comments or discussion for Mr. Thomas at this time? Mr. Cooper.
The lower number on the technology salary study,
Yes.
is that, what lowered that? Are we going to are we doing phasing there, or what are we doing?
We actually worked with Diane it was to 275, and we just had overestimated that, and we just worked actually on implementing the system that she wanted, and we felt like we could get it down to 68,000 as full implementation. It also includes some
Our
certification programs and get some folks up to
Our
speed.
original budget number was just an estimate. It was based similar to the maintenance salary study, but when we actually applied real people to the new salary study, it was a lot less. We really just had a number in a holding place until we could run specific people with the salary. And if you have the salary book, and you can see now that technology has their own salary schedule that they follow.
So that basically our projections were ultra aggressive.
That's what I always try to do.
Conservative implementation.
Yeah, and the budget, and the nice thing about our budget program now, we used to use a number like $65,000 for a teacher salary, but now we can actually apply the person
to the amount.
to the amount and get real numbers.
Right, and to the actual employee benefits as well. So it's a very accurate system.
Right, Mr. Cooper, does that conclude your comments at this time? Does anybody else have a question or comment? Mr. Obie? I'll work my way down to you, Ms. Moore.
With both scenarios you showed up there, none of it shows any money coming out of the reserve fund to help balance the budget this year?
Ms. Lee?
On the revenue options or expenditure reductions, are we saying that we're going to implement all of those? Because I know we already have the driver's ed. We had a reduction in the budget, or the supply budget for the teachers.
That's full. That was just an option that we were going to implement. We haven't done that in this scenario. No.
Okay.
The two options that you've already approved was the driver's ed.
Right.
We approved last year, and the middle college was approved earlier this year. And I think Mr. Thomas showed the revenue from the middle college and
Yes.
on that final analysis.
Right.
It was like $6,500 or something like that.
Ms. Lee? All right. Any
Well, we
other
could do
questions
that
or
if you want.
comments?
So, yeah, we did not do the supplies
No.
or the technology fee.
Ms. Schwabe?
I think I've heard the explanation before, but I can't remember that fifth day planning thing. at
I have a
elementary
question
level.
about it as well.
Talk to me about that again. What is that? What's that getting? I know it's getting something back.
And that was not cut. That made the cut, right? It's in the budget, the
It's in the
fifth day
budget.
planning. Okay,
But
good.
But there was.
It does not,
Yeah.
it does not, right now, the district provides 4 days revenue to the schools for 4 days of planning at the elementary level. So we provide enough teachers, lab assistants, music teachers, PE, some art for 4 days. And for the schools to have a fifth day, it's because they've created something at their own level. They're using their own funds, or they're using a guidance counselor to move students, the media specialist to schedule things through there. So we don't fund the fifth day. So some schools are able to do it with their own funds or with they have enough staff, but some can't. So this is an attempt to try to get 5 days of planning that we fund at all our elementary schools. We're not quite getting there, and state law requires 60 minutes of PE. Currently, we're at 45, so the 8 additional teachers, I think there's 5, maybe Susan, is there 4 or 5 PE teachers, so we could try to get that number to 60. We do meet the requirement for 90 minutes of physical activity, but because the way the law reads, upon adequate funding, but the state hasn't funded us at the adequate level for 60 minutes of PE, we've had to pick it up on the local side to get 45 minutes. I can remember a couple of years ago we were down to maybe 30 minutes a week for PE. So we've got it to 45, and this will help get us closer to 60, not quite all the way there, but making some steps. The original number we cut, I think we had 11 or 12 teachers there and 11 or 12 lab assistants, but we tried to make the budget balance.
It's good news. So that made the cut. Ms. Schwab, any other comments, questions? Ms. Moore?
My question for any of our employees, when we have mandatory workshops, during the summer, they're not paid?
Good question.
Certain things are paid. We did put in the instructional calendar this year a flex day that all employees have 1 day that they're paid for prior to the start of school. Under the teachers under 190-day contract, so we gave them 1 flex day that they could use outside of our contract time. So they're paid for it indirectly.
What about other employees other than teachers?
Other employees,
If they have a workshop to attend, they're not paid to attend the workshop?
if they're not a teacher, I'm not sure that I'm following you. If we have a classified staff, they would get paid a 40-hour week, and if they go over their 40 hours, we would pay them overtime.
So,
Let me try to, depending on the length of contract, if they're outside of their contract, if it's a teacher or a teacher assistant that's on a 190-day contract and they work over the summer, we try to give most folks a stipend, depending on at least $50 for the day for that training.
that's what I'm asking. So is that any of your employees or just teachers, certified teachers? Oh.
I would say our teachers, we do have some training, like if we have bus driver training, we try to work that within their contracted days.
Okay.
I mean, do you have a specific example that you're asking about, or do you know a specific person you want me to look into?
Well, yeah, I'll let you know. I'll tell you.
Yeah, not all trainings give stipends. We do give the flex day. Everybody has one flex day that they can use prior to the start of school that they get paid for. And then sometimes they're earning renewal credit. That's, so they're getting something. It's like a graduate course for their certificate. So if that's the case, they wouldn't.
They wouldn't get
Yeah, but
any
if it's a
money.
required training, we usually give a small stipend for them to be there.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Wright, Mr. Hayes? All right. Anyone else? Mr. Cooper?
Can you go back to the spreadsheet? Can you go back to the Spreadsheet?
Yes, the stable.
I just want to make sure I'm clear on something. The other one that has your expenditures. Right there, right there. Now, revenues are 223.5 at 142.9. Now, we've got instruction support at 221, and then we've got cuts that we've taken out of the priorities. Now, how come when I go over to the 144 column, why wouldn't the instruction support still be 221 and then my cuts from priorities be
Because I'm
reduced?
adding an additional 1% for the classified salary.
You're increasing
Yes,
the
yeah,
step
yeah.
costs.
Not the step cost, but for the salary schedule. That was an option as if you were interested in going to the 144.2. We
But it
wanted to
wouldn't
give you a
get
reason
any of our
to.
priority cuts back. You're still taking all the priorities cuts. We're not taking any of that back
No,
from our priorities.
I'm just adding it to the.
He's added another 2% to
Right.
the classified staff salary schedule.
But
You see it?
I just don't understand if you're adding it back in there and that's part of the priorities, why wouldn't that cut have gone down?
I could have shown it there too. That
Yes.
would've been- Yeah, it would have been same effect.
Because really, we're putting that back into a
Right,
priority,
right.
correct?
Yes, and that'd been a better way to look at it.
But I think it's clear, is
Yeah.
we would allow us, that says we're still taking the cuts
Yeah.
from the
Right,
priorities,
right.
but yet there's some more revenue, there's more costs somehow
Right,
coming
Just
back.
added it to the other column.
Yeah.
instead.
Where it would have shown if we'd have had.
should have reduced
That
the-
221,585 should have been the same on the other side.
Right,
that's
and
what we
reduce
said,
the-
and then
reduce
reduce the
the
priorities.
priorities, yeah.
All right, all
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So you good?
I'm good now.
Okay.
All right.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Thomas, could I ask you to pull that one slide up that I had the question regarding the CPI Act 388? So we have the opportunity, and I said this last year, and I apologize for being redundant, but I want to remind everybody where Berkeley County is. We are in the 35th percentile when it comes to the mills being levied to fund this budget. That means 65% of all of South Carolina school districts levy more taxes than we do. We are more than $1,000 below the average cost per pupil. Now, that second line represents the legislature shifting that responsibility to school boards and telling us this year that we have the authority to increase by 5.2 mils under the Act 388 formula. At some point, we're going to have to address that gap in funding. That's my only comment. I said the same thing last year. We cannot blame the state legislature. They have put it on our backs. So when this board is ready to tackle that problem, I'm in. Let me know. Mr. Cooper?
And to that point, I mean, by law, we're supposed to have 2742 or something for base student costs this year. And we're not getting it when by law, that's what we're supposed to get. So they continue to put all the burden down to here to the school districts to say, you figure it out. And I'm with Mr. Murray. We've done a pretty darn good job because I think we were ranked in the top 5 as far as results and the top 5 as far as size and state, but yet we're 40, we're like you said, there's 65% more, they're spending more money per person getting not as good a results as we're getting. So
Well, I have an
pretty
idea.
good bang for the buck.
Maybe we ought to take ourselves to the New York Stock Exchange.
Well, it just gets very frustrating. We're sitting here playing around with you know, halves and 1% for teachers' raises and things that they so deserve for the results that they're getting. All we hear out of the State House is pay for performance, and our teachers are kicking it in the butt and getting it done. And we're sitting here scrambling, well, how do we give them another 0.5%? Because the state won't fund us to what we're supposed to get by law. And I'm ready to talk about it sometime too, because our delegation certainly doesn't help us.
And I think our intent has been to save our taxpayers, overburdening our taxpayers during tough economic times, but at some point, we do have to focus on what we're here to do.
Well, anything we do on operating mills, though, you know, everybody, it's not going to impact the people living here. It's going to impact our business people, which I don't like.
Well, I don't know.
It's the 6% properties are the ones that are going to get it. You're not raising it on 4%, because by law you can't.
And your boats and your vehicles will spread it out a little bit to your 4%.
A little bit, but our growth is coming by new households being built, and, you know, Nexton being built, you know, Parks of Berkeley, now Cainhoy Plantation being built. We're going to see thousands and thousands, but yet that burden's going to fall to our 6% properties.
Correct. Our small business
And I don't
owners.
think that's fair.
Yeah, I don't. Any questions or comments? Are we finished with Mr. Thomas? Dr. Thompson?
Public.
Thank you. We do have agenda item 3B. It's now time. If anyone has any comments regarding the budget, the podium is available for you. We'll invite you. Mr. Ruhr, I see you're ready, sir. You can have the podium first. And if anyone would like to follow Mr. Ruhr, we'll take you as you step forward. Mr. Ruhr.
Thank you. Jeff Ruhr, 100 Mepkin Drive, Somerville. One thing I noticed that wasn't mentioned in the budget was legal fees. I understand that all school districts have a certain amount of legal fees because it's something you need to operate the district. However, what concerns me is based on a report in the Post and Courier recently, this district being the 4th biggest district in the state, spent over twice as much in legal fees since November 11 as the second closest one, which was Charleston. We spent $1.2 million since November 2011. Charleston come in second at $5.5 million. I just think this is something that the board could look at and address. It seems like this is a little excessive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ruhr. Do we have any other comments for this evening? Mr. Thomas, absolutely, sir. You represent the Office of Finance. Yes, sir.
Part of those legal fees were some very complicated refunding issues, and one of those was that we saved a little over $27 million in one refunding. So part of that fee was
Over
a
half.
really good return, so I wanted to share that.
Saved us some money in the long run. Do those fees come out of the debt service side?
They come out of they're part of the cost of issuance of the actual bond issue.
So it would be the debt service side of the budget? Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Cooper?
Just along the same lines, is that this district also doesn't choose to pay those legal fees. We have to. I mean, when things are filed against us, we have the obligation to do what we have to do by law. And regretfully, yeah, it's very expensive when things that happen to us have happened to us. But all we can do is respond to actions brought against us.
I, too, would rather spend that money elsewhere. But as long as we keep getting sued, we must respond.
Other people are gaining personally.
Right. All right. Hearing no further comment, last opportunity. I serve at the pleasure of the board. All right. Hearing no further public comment, we'll adjourn the meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Mr. Cooper's made a motion. That motion has been seconded by Ms. Lee to adjourn. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. The meeting is adjourned.